There's nothing I like better than beginning a meal, particularly if you can begin with a little shellfish appetizer, such as crab legs, one of these little tiny things. You'll see how to use these when we do more great beginnings today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. You know, there was a time when you couldn't get any shellfish at all unless you lived right by the ocean. But nowadays you can get fresh cooked shellfish any place in the country, like these crab. And of course, crab comes in many kinds of containers, either a leg container or a package or a can. And it comes, these legs come frozen. And these are Alaskan king crab. And they're cooked in Alaska and frozen. And then they're sent any place else in the country. And when you find them in the supermarket, very often they're defrosted, and once in a while you can get them when they're frozen, and they're just as hard as a rock. And if you get them frozen, you just keep them in your freezer until you're ready to use them. And before you can get the meat out of them, you have to let them thaw. You can either, I usually thaw them in a basin of cold water, and I find it only takes about half a minute. Then, when you want to get the meat out, it comes out very easily because they're quite soft when they have thawed, and you just break them off at the joints. And be careful because they've got these prickly spines, so do it with caution. And if it's a little too hard, you can take a scissor and just cut right up. And open it up, and this bottom joint has solid meat in it. You don't have to do anything but just cut it or flake it up. But then as you get farther up the joint, you will notice that there's some filaments in the meat, and you've got to take them out. I think that's why you have, you usually get crab that's flaked. You notice this big filament in there. You have to separate that from the meat, and I think I'll probably find another one. And here's another one here. So be sure that when you get these, you go all through the meat to take those pieces of filament out. And I don't. One whole crab leg contains about half a cup of meat, or a quarter of a pound. And it can be very good. I'm going to wash my hands off now. And another way that you can get crab meat is in a package like this. This is the Alaskan king crab, and this is a half-pound package, frozen, just as hard as a rock. And when you unfreeze it, it looks like this. You see that's your solid leg meat, and then on the inside of the package, I guess they have flaked out the rest of it. So this is very convenient. And it also doesn't cost very little more than buying a whole leg, and it's all ready to eat. However, whenever you're buying frozen shellfish, it's got to taste good. It should taste almost as good as the fresh. And sometimes this frozen shellfish has the most horrible taste. And I think that's because the market in which you have bought it doesn't take very much interest or doesn't know enough about frozen food to treat it properly. I've been in a frozen food plant up in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and I had some of the frozen fish, and it was perfectly delicious at the plant. And then I tried to buy some frozen fish in some of our stores, and it was perfectly horrible. And I think it has to be kept always at 0 degrees, and the store has to keep it at 0 degrees, and you have to keep it at 0 degrees. And that's what makes it go off. And it's we, the public, who've got to complain about it. If you get some frozen fish that doesn't taste good and doesn't smell the way it should, take it right back to your market and complain, because it's only we, the public, who can do anything about changing the way it's handled. Because it should be delicious, and then there's no reason why we can't buy it that way. And of course, the third way of buying crab, cooked crab, is in the can. And if you test out several brands and find the one that you like, you'll find that it's always available. You can always have it on your shelf. And it can be very good indeed. It has to smell good, and it should have a lovely fresh taste. It should taste almost like fresh crab. And when this is packed in the can neatly in its little bit of paper, it has some juice, sort of preservative juices in, about as much as that. And this, you want to wash out the crab, because if you don't, it'll still taste like canned crab. So what I always do is just to take it into a bowl of water, and it isn't going to hurt it at all to wash it off. In fact, it's going to help it a great deal. And break it up a little bit, and then just pour it through a sieve. And you'll find that this will give it a much fresher taste. And then, in the canned crab, even though they say it's fancy canned crab, you'll also find that there are these little lines of gristle, so that you'll have to separate each piece. Now, this one I haven't yet found any. There's one of those little tendons. So you just have to go through the whole thing with your fingers. I guess that's why they call it flaked crab, to be sure that you don't have any of these little, see, there's another one. And if you serve that in it, it would be very unpleasant. And this can that I have here is about half a pound. Be sure that you read on the can how much crab meat there is in it, and then go through it all. Maybe if you've got some that was called super fancy and cost twice as much, you'd get some without any of these little tendons in. And then after you've cleaned it out, you're ready to serve it. And you can serve it naturally either cold or hot. And we're going to serve it hot first, and then we're going to serve it cold. We're going to serve it hot in a little wine sauce. And this recipe, this method, because this is really a method more than a recipe, you can use any kind of shellfish this way. Cooked shellfish, whether it's fresh, canned, or frozen, could be lobster, crab, or shrimp. And always you have to give it a little preliminary flavor, because it's really sort of a base material first. And as usual in French cooking, you start out with a little tiny onion flavor. You can either use a shallot, which is a baby member of the onion family with a delicate taste, or a scallion. And we haven't done shallots from the beginning for some time, so I thought I'd refresh your memory. Peel it off, and it has sort of a little purplish, it's a purplish white color. And you'll find that in the summertime you can't get shallots. You can only, if you grow them yourself, you can just get regular shallots that you buy, and I guess put them in the ground. I've never been able to grow anything because I have a black thumb, but I think they're very easy to grow. Now I've cut it in half and then put the cut side down on the table, and take a little knife and cut up and down slices, and then cut horizontal slices, keeping the shallot together at the end, and then cut straight down, and there you are with diced shallot. And that's very quick to do. And if you are going to do a scallion, you cut off the root end and then cut off just about where the green has begun, then cut it in half, and then cut the halves into strips. And whenever you're dicing things, I'm going to have to move it a little closer to me, you want to cut them into little pieces that are about 1/16 of an inch. In other words, it's really minced. Then you have your minced shallot or onion, and cook that for about a minute or two in a little bit of butter. I've got some melted butter here. I'm going to put in about 2 tablespoons. And I'm having about 2 tablespoons of minced shallot or scallion. And you just want to cook that very, very slowly for just a minute or two until it softens. It doesn't seem to be cooking very fast yet. And then we're going to make an appetizer for 4 people using about half a pound. This is just about a cup of crab meat. And we're going to have some seasonings in it, salt and pepper and herbs. So you just cook that for just about a moment until it's softened. You don't want to brown it, because if you cook it over too high heat or too much, the scallion gets bitter. And then put in your crab meat. This is very important, this little preliminary flavoring in butter and seasonings, because this is what is going to give it its attractive character. And then put on a little sprinkling of salt, and then a little bit of freshly ground pepper. And then an herb, I'm going to use some dried tarragon. If you had fresh tarragon, that would be even better. Just about half a teaspoonful. And this is a warming up. And then you get your wine flavoring, and this is going to be a dry white wine. I always use dry white French vermouth, because I find one is much safer with it. And I'm going to put in about 1/3 to 1/2 of a cup. And then this is to boil down, because you want to boil out all of the alcohol and leave only the flavor. And then after you have this boiled down, you're ready to make your sauce. And you can sauce it in 2 ways. You can either use our old friend, the bechamel, with some cream in it, making that in a separate pan and then folding your flavored crab meat in. Or you can use another method of making the sauce right in the pan. And I think I'll show you that one, because we haven't done it before and it's so quick and easy to do. And with this, I'm going to make it a cornstarch and cream sauce, using the cornstarch to give it a slight thickening. And for about a cup of crab meat, we should probably have 3/4 of a cup of sauce. So I'll use a tablespoon of cornstarch, and it goes into a bowl. And then gradually beat the cream in, just to make sure gotta get all the lumps out of the cornstarch. And I'm using heavy cream. Just be sure when you're beating it that you use your wire whip, and be sure that there are no lumps in. And I'm putting in there about 1/2 a cup of cream. And then you want to let your liquid in there boil down. It's always, in using wine in cooking, you always want to get rid of the alcohol, because it's a very unpleasant taste. And the only reason you use the wine is for having that lovely under flavor or perfume that the wine has. Then after this is boiled down, take it off the heat and mix in the cornstarch and cream mixture, stirring. If you mix this in while it was still boiling, then it would probably lump up. Then after it's mixed in, put it back over the heat and let it boil up again. Because with this you want to cook the cornstarch, which takes a minute or two, and then you won't have any floury taste. And also you don't want to add the full amount of cream at once because you want to see how thick it is. And this depends on how you're going to serve your crab. Whether you want it to be fairly loose or whether you want it to be rather thick. Say if you're going to put it in little individual dishes and gratinate it. You see that's beginning to thicken up. And it takes a minute or two of cooking before it's thickened as much as it's supposed to. And just keep stirring it so nothing will burn on the bottom. Now I use just about a tablespoon of cornstarch there. And that's enough for about 3/4 of a cup of liquid. But with this kind of a thing, you play it by eye a little bit. Now I think it would be nice to have a slight pink blush to this. So I'm going to put in just about a half teaspoon of tomato paste, and that just gives it a little slightly pink color, which is very attractive. And I'm cooking this down now because I want it to be fairly thick. And if by any chance you don't want to cook it more, I mean, it isn't thick enough, you can always add a little bit more cornstarch. And I think probably also it would be nice to have a little bit of lemon flavoring here. And I use that good old system of squeezing the lemon through the towel, which is so easy because you don't get the seeds in. But a little lemon, whenever you're cooking with cream, just perks it up a bit. Now I think that's almost thick enough. I'm going to taste it now and see if we've got enough salt and pepper and things in. Be sure you get in the habit of tasting everything, because it's terrible to go to the trouble of cooking and then just for the lack of salt or pepper. That's very good. It's surprising, I think, once you have your flavoring done. Oh, it needs a little tiny bit more salt now that I've turned it over my tongue. I think very often with food it's the aftertalk that. I think that now is already, I mean the aftertaste that gives you the clue as to whether you've got enough seasoning. And now this is all made and you can serve it in anything you like. Say if you have just a little baking dish, or you can serve it inside a ring of rice or in a vol au vent, or you can put it in individual dishes and gratinate it. I just have a whole collection of here. Just use anything you have in the house. Or you can use shells like this. I always seem to end up serving things in scallop shells just because I think they're pretty. So I'm going to use those. And with these you want to butter the shells first. I've got these already buttered, but just take the butter in your fingers just a little bit and rub it all around the inside of the shell. And then they're all ready to fill. And these I'm going to put the crab in, and then they can be gratinated in the oven, which makes them very attractive. I think I could have had a little more cornstarch in here because it seems a little bit loose. But I think it's going to be all right. You want it to have enough body so it will hold up in the shell. But this is the nice kind of recipe. Once you've gotten on to the system of doing this, you can just sort of adapt it to anything that you're using. And it's so quick to make. Now, I still have a little bit more. I don't want to overfill the shells. Then, so that they will brown nicely in the oven, you want to either sprinkle them with breadcrumbs or with grated Swiss cheese. The French always use Swiss cheese because it has a lovely nutty flavor, but it isn't too strong, and just a little tiny sprinkling of it, you wouldn't really know that there was any cheese on it. But it gives the browning. And then you want to have some butter, either a little piece of fresh butter, if you have some melted butter, just a few drops of melted butter. And that is your browning medium. You see, now that's not difficult to do, and it's been done very fast. And I'm going to wipe off. There's some little dribblies down there, which I'm going to wipe off so that they won't brown in the dish. And I have here one of these ceramic dishes that is fireproof, which is very convenient either for baking or for serving. And now, with this, you can get this all ready for baking. You can either cook it right now, or if you want to do it ahead of time, let it cool off, and then cover it with plastic wrap or something and put it in the refrigerator. That's the nice thing about this, if you can get this all ready, say, the day ahead of time, and then just before you're ready to serve, take it out of the refrigerator, and your first course is all ready. And this is now going to be put in the oven, and it's to be either baked or broiled until the contents is bubbling and the top is lightly browned. If you have had it in the refrigerator, you put it into a 400-degree oven in the upper third, so it would brown nicely in about 15 minutes. But I'm putting it in under a slow broiler, which will take about 5 minutes. But you have to be able to keep your eye on it because you don't want the top to burn black. And now we have some crab that we're going to do cold. And this also goes fast. And this would be cooked crab, either fresh, frozen, or canned. And this has all been gone through so that there are none of those little strings and filaments in. And I've got about 2 cups here. And again, you have to have a preliminary flavoring in it. And again, we'll start in with some minced shallots or scallions. I'm putting about 2 tablespoons of them. And then you want some salt and pepper. And again, some lemon juice. And with this, if you're going to serve it cold, you want it to sort of absorb flavor, sort of marinate. And you want to do the flavoring of it at least, if you can, at least 20 minutes before you're going to serve it. And then you can serve it just as it is, or with some mayonnaise. And then put some kind of an herb on, like chopped parsley. I'm going to use about a teaspoon of basil. And then just a little bit of olive oil, because the olive oil makes the flavor carry. Probably about 2 tablespoons. And then toss it all up nicely. And then let it stand. I think a little bit of parsley would be nice in here too. Just chop that up. Then after you have all this in, you want to taste it. I'll put in the parsley and then taste it. You could, of course, put in chopped celery or cucumbers, whatever else you felt would be nice with it. Of course, that extends it a little bit more, but if you want to have pure crab, I think it's very nice to have nothing else in it. Now I'm going to taste that and see if that's all right. It is very nice. I'm going to squeeze in a little more lemon. I think all the seeds are out of that. And be sure, taste. That's one of the most important things in cooking. Then after this is stood for 20 minutes, you just let it stand for an hour or 2 in the refrigerator. You can then put on some mayonnaise, or you could fold in a little bit of sour cream. I've got some lovely homemade mayonnaise here, so I'll just put some of that in. Not just enough so it will enrobe the crab. You don't want to drown anything in mayonnaise. And I think it's particularly important if you are going to have a seafood mayonnaise that you have the preliminary flavoring first. And now I'm going to put these in. If you have any containers like this, these are fresh crab shells. That's very attractive. I have seen ceramic crab shells. They'd be very nice. You can serve that in individual dishes or on a decorative plate like this. Fill the shells and arrange them around your crab. These little fresh crab are quite a job to pick, and I think if you have a nice flavoring, nobody will know whether it's fresh or not fresh. Now I'm just got to take a look at my gratin here. That's almost ready. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. Well, as I was saying, if you have a little bit of fresh crab, you can mix some canned crab along with it. And it looks very nice. And if you have a little extra crab legs, you can put them around. So that is all ready to serve. And I'm going to see how yeah, those are fine. They're bubbling and nicely browned. So we're ready to serve. There, now here is our gratin, petit gratin de crabe. And with this, you could serve a rather full white wine like a fouissé or a traminer. And with your mayonnaise de crabe, you could serve a Riesling, which would be very nice indeed. Now, I think that these two dishes make an awfully attractive beginning. They look very pretty on the table, and they're awfully appetizing. And don't laugh at what I'm going to say, but they're terribly easy to make. You just saw me do it. They couldn't be easier. And they taste so good. They're really so good that it hardly makes any difference what else you have in the meal. Well, that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.